This is the next bowl we're going to make. It's going to be about 2 inches at the top, 12.5 at the top. At the bottom, about 2 inches at the bottom, 12.5 at the top, about 4.5 inches tall. And the sides are going to come up at a straight angle. And the advantage to doing that is that each row, the width of the pieces are exactly the same length. If you have a sharp curve at the bottom of the bowl, you start off with a real wide piece at the bottom, and as you come up the side, they keep getting smaller and smaller. This is going to be the design on the bowl, and a lot of people have asked me, you have to take into consideration this row at the bottom is going to be so much smaller than the top, it will not look exactly like this. Gets distorted as it comes up the bowl, but you'll see that as we go along. Whether or not I put these pieces in the middle, I don't know if I'll do that. This is what it would look like if I leave those pieces out. I have the number of pieces I need of each color for each row, and I have the segment size made in spreadsheets. This time we're going to use Padauk, Bubinga, and Maple. I have these cut to, and then I on the bandsaw, and then I ran them through the planer. They are about 0.270 inches thick. That allows me a little bit of room to sand each row down and end up with a 1/4 inch row. So I'm not going to show too much this time on actually putting the segments on the segmented wheel. That's been in several videos now. But more or less just to show you what this design would look like in a bowl with straight sides. So I have the base, it's going to be maple, the top's going to be maple. I have that glued fast to the waste block, so I will set up the saw and we'll start cutting pieces. Now, since the accuracy for an open segmented bowl is not near as critical as for a solid ring, I have this made up. This is for 48 pieces at 2.75 degrees, and this side would be for 24 pieces at 5.5 degrees. So I just put that again in the saw blade, adjust this accordingly, and that's how I set the table saw. There's the maple pieces cut for the first row. As you can see, all these little fuzzies have to be cleaned off the end. Very time consuming. Ring 1 has been put on. Now, two odd things. Normally it takes me 30 to 35 minutes to put 48 pieces on. This took over 55 minutes, almost an hour. Another odd thing was these pieces are so thin that when I put sanding sealer on one side of the end grain, it actually bled through the maple and came out the other side. So we'll leave that dry and we'll cut ring number 2. Ring number 2 is on. Ring 3 is on. The 4th ring is on. That's 6 rows on. That's row 7. That's row 8 on. Now the next row is row 9, and that's where the little dots in the middle come out. And I've decided to put Purple Heart in there. And I believe at the beginning of this video I said that was Padauk Bubinga. It's not Bubinga, that's Wenge and Maple. So we'll put that row on and sand it off, and that'll be halfway up the bowl. That's ring 9 on, but the top hasn't been sanded yet. Now we have 9 rows on. First 3 or 4 rows have been turned, roughly. And what I've been using lately is this is my David Ellsworth grind. And I hold the flute almost up on its end and trim these off, because don't forget these are very short and the end grain runs this way. You can chip a chunk up very easily. Up until the 4th row I've been running this at around 1,000 RPMs. Now I've turned it back to about 700. So we are going to trim some of those edges off. we're about to the point where we're going to pick up a lot of vibration. So we'll do these down in here, and if need be, we'll put a block down in there. Okay, we have the corners knocked off, all but the last 2 rows. Now the next thing we got to do is keep this flat. So we'll use our sanding board with the tapered edges. Now I'm going to turn the dust sucker on. Try to control some of this dust. Good. Now we'll put the next row on. Now when the pieces are this small, you don't get shavings. It looks like salt and pepper. That's what comes off. I got an email today from a fellow by the name of Mike, and he's having a squeeze out problem. That's all the more glue I put on, and keep it to the very outside edge. That way it squeezes out a little bit in, but it doesn't go in far enough that it actually goes into the hole. Put that on there. Very small amount of glue. You don't want a whole lot of squeeze out. That's row number 10 on. Ring number 11 is on. Row number 12 is on. Hasn't been sanded yet though. That's 12 rows on. Row number 13 is on. Set for a couple of seconds. Hold this piece just in case it decides to move. Wipe out the extra glue. Move on to the next piece. That's row number 14 on. Row number 15 is on. 16 rows in place. That's ring number 17. That's the last ring. The next ring will be a solid ring of maple. So we'll have to get out the 48 piece sled, calculate what size they have to be, and the marks on top of the pieces you see there, it hasn't been sanded yet, when I run these through the thickness planer, on one side I just make sure all the rough cuts, saw cuts from the bandsaw are removed, and the other side I plane perfectly smooth. Then I mark the side that I didn't really finish, and that side is up. That's why all the marks on the maple and all the other pieces. So now we'll make the solid ring and glue it to the top. I have the 48 piece sled on the table saw, and I ripped 2 pieces of maple. They're about 46 inches long, and they are 380.380 thickness, so a little over 3/8. I want the top ring a little bit thicker. That allows me to cut it down to whatever size I want. And the setting here is 0.818 to give me a 12.5 inch ring. And since the saw cut takes about 1/8 of an inch, 0.125, I'm virtually an inch to each piece of stock. So we're going to cut 48 or 49 pieces, and we'll put the ring together. Here's a shot of the bowl without the top ring on. Next thing we'll do is glue the top ring on. The top ring's all glued together. As soon as that glue dries, we'll sand it off, one side anyhow, and we'll glue the bowl to it. Okay, the top ring's been glued to the bowl. We will leave that dry an hour or so, relieve the pressure, and tomorrow we can turn it. Here's a shot of the bowl before we turn it, top ring and all. I just took it out of the ring press, so we'll leave that dry at least till tomorrow. And then before I turn it, I'm going to spray lacquer in between all these cracks. I'll spray down, let it dry, turn it up, and then spray the other direction. And then we'll turn it. That way all the mess that we make in here doesn't matter, because it's going to get turned off anyhow. So we'll spray it tomorrow. I have sprayed on 3 coats of high gloss lacquer in between all these, where all the holes are, before we start the turning. And I'll give you a shot of the outside, and then we'll turn the bowl. That's what the outside looks like before we start. The inside's been turned. Now to turn the outside and take a lot of the vibration out, I put the one-way center in there with a faceplate and a piece of MDF. That makes it a lot more solid than it would be without it. That's a picture of the finished bowl before the finish is put on. I'll give you a shot from the side, and then we will put a finish on it. And that's a shot from the side. After we put a finish on it, of course, we'll cut this way down, cut it off with a handsaw, and put it in the cold jaws. Now that the bowl is complete, this is the lumber that I have left over. So I've been asked how much would it take to make something like this. I'll show you the bowl here in a little bit. We started off with 12 foot of Padauk, 10.5 feet of wenge, and 21 1/3 feet of maple, not counting this piece for the base. These was 2 strips almost 48 inches long, and I've used about 5 foot, but I had to cut around things like knots and stuff like that, pieces that I didn't use. That's 3/8 of it. These are all 1 inch wide, except for the wenge. The wenge is only about 7/8. I don't know if you noticed in there, but it's not quite the same height. So what we actually used was, I used 67 inches of the Padauk, which is about 5.5 feet. The wenge I used 6.5 feet, and the maple I used 18 feet of maple. Total 215 inches. Of course, a lot of that ends up in sawdust on the floor. So I hope that helps you with that question. And next we will take a look at the bowl on the lathe. I put a finish on it, but we still have to cut the bottom off and things like that. So that's where we'll go next. That is 3 coats of sanding sealer and 3 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. I'll give you a shot from the side. And that's what the outside of the bowl looks like. Now, and I'll leave that finished dry till tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll cut this way down, put it in the cold jaws and finish it. Now we can cut it off with the handsaw. The bowl is finished. To save a lot of email, it has 168 pieces of wenge, 168 pieces of padauk, 521 pieces of maple, and 8 pieces of purple heart. It is 12 1/8 inches in diameter at the top. It stands 5 1/8 inches tall, and it's 2 1/8 inches at the base. It took 12 days to make. Of course, that's counting ripping the lumber, planing the lumber, that kind of stuff. So, once again, I'd like to thank you for watching.